In the year 117 AD, the world stood beneath the shadow of a titan. From the deserts of Arabia to the cold shores of Britannia, from the sun-bleached walls of Africa to the thick forests of Germania, Rome stretched like a great bronze hand across the earth. And wherever that hand reached, the ground trembled. For Rome was not merely an empire, it was an engine, an unyielding machine carved from iron discipline and centuries of conquest. Its legions marched in perfect rhythm, shields locked like the jaws of a lion, ready to swallow all who defied it. But far beyond the marble roads and golden halls of the capital, there lay another world, a world of tribes scattered, proud, and fiercely alive. They rose with the mountains, they breathed with the forests. They fought not for glory, but for the soil beneath their feet and the stories carried by the wind. They were hunters, herders, wanderers, and warriors, men and women shaped by the land, not by law. And in 117 AD, their world faced a question sharper than any Roman blade. Can a tribal world survive the greatest war machine the earth had ever seen? The Romans brought roads, strategy, siege engines, armor that gleamed beneath the sun. They fought as one binder, a single mind. To face them in open battle was to stand before a storm. But tribes possessed something the empire never fully understood. They knew the forests better than any map. They could vanish into mountains where Roman boots grew slow. They could strike in the night, fade with the mist, and let the land itself fight by their side. Rome had steel, but tribes had spirit. Rome had numbers, but tribes had home. Rome had order, but tribes had freedom. And so the battles that followed were not merely struggles of power. They were tests of identity. Every spear thrown from a shadowed ridge carried a message. We are still here, and that was something Rome could never fully hide. For even when an empire claims the soil, it can never fully claim the soul. So can a tribal world survive the Roman war machine? Yes, not always in victory, not always in triumph, but in endurance. For long after empires crumble into dust, the stories of those who resisted still rise from the earth like smoke from an ancient fire. And in those stories, the tribal world lives on. Across the boundaries of Rome's polished world, far beyond the reach of senators, marble columns, and disciplined legions, there lived another kind of people. A world as rugged as the mountains they called home. A world Rome never truly understood. These were tribes whose bloodline stretched back before the first Roman brick was ever laid. They lived by instinct, not decree. By tradition, not law. Every river had a spirit, every mountain held a memory, and the land was not territory, it was family. In the early morning frost, warriors painted their faces with the colors of their ancestors. Their shields were not mass-produced in factories of empire. They were carved by hand, shaped by fathers, and carried by sons. Each one a story, each one a story, each one a legacy. They fought with passion, not hope, with courage, not command structure, and yet, for all their strength, there lay a shadow in their path. For Rome was not a single enemy. Rome was an entire world, unified, ordered, relentless. But the tribes were many, each with its own chief, its own god, its own pride. One tribe fought in the forests, another fought on the plains, another hid high in the cliffs where Roman ambitions grew thin, but rarely, too rarely, did they fight together. Where Rome brought roads that tied its empire into one unbroken beast, the tribes were bound by rivers, mountains, distance, and distrust. 100 proud voices, but no single roar. Still, their spirit burned brighter than any Roman torch. They moved with the land as if born from it. They knew its secrets, the hidden streams, the narrow passes, the valleys that swallowed whole armies. They could rise from the mist like ghosts and disappear again before the Romans could even speak their names. They were the heartbeat of their lands, untamed, unbroken, fearless. And even as the greatest empire the world had ever seen close its iron fist around their borders, the tribe stood with a message whispered by the wind. We will not kneel, not for Rome, not for any empire. For though they lacked Rome's machines, its discipline, its endless armies, they possessed something far older than empire, identity, memory, freedom. And no matter how powerful Rome became, no matter how wide its shadow stretched, these tribes, small, scattered, but fiercely alive, refused to let their world fade quietly into history. They were not just fighting for land, they were fighting for life itself. And so beneath the skies of 117 AD, the world braced for a collision that was far bigger than armies, maps, or piles. It It was not simply Rome marching against tribes. It was civilization clashing with wilderness, order colliding with freedom, destiny confronting tradition. Rome believed itself chosen by the gods to civilize the world. It forged laws with the same precision it forged swords. To the empire, war was not chaos. It was a system perfected through centuries of blood and calculation. But the tribes, they did not fight for empire or ambition or the promise of eternal glory. They fought for the soil beneath their feet, the rivers that sung their ancestors' names, the sacred groves where their children would someday stand. Their courage did not flow from ranks or formations. It flowed from memory, from identity, from the simple truth that some things in this world are worth more than life itself. And when those two worlds collided, the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Rome advanced in perfect lines, shields glinting, standards raised high, the eagle shining above them like the eye of a god. The tribes answered not with precision, but with fire. With roars carried across the wind, with ambushes in forests where no Roman formation could survive. With strikes so sudden, they felt like the land itself was reaching out to fight. And in those moments, Rome learned something no emperor had written into his scrolls. Steel is strong. But spirit can be unbreakable. Battles were won, battles were lost. But survival was not decided only by victory. It was decided by memory, by what people refused to let die. Even when Rome conquered a land, the stories of those who resisted, the warriors who vanished into the woods, the chieftains who stood until their final breath, the mothers who raised their children to remember, these stories lived on. And long after the Roman Empire cracked, faded, and finally fell into dust, the tribes remained. Changed, yes, scarred undoubtedly, but alive. Because in the end, empires rise with iron. But cultures endure with spirit. And no matter how powerful the Roman war machine became, no matter how wide its shadow stretched across the earth, it could never extinguish the flame carried in the hearts of those who chose freedom over fear, identity over surrender, and memory over empire. That is how a tribal world survives. Not by conquering Rome, but by refusing to disappear.